Book title: Hidden Complications and Study of the Effects of Sexual Fantasies. Written by Vahid Zakavodi. Copyright 2024 NLP Radio. Introduction. Have you ever traveled deep into your mind? To a land where dreams and mental images come to life without your will and take you to an unknown world? Sexual fantasies are one of those experiences that can seem fascinating and exciting. But is this the truth? Or maybe something much more than meets the eye? For many, sexual fantasies open a window to another world, where every imagination is possible and every mental image can become reality. But what effect do these images, these short moments, have on us? Are they just a passing pleasure, or is there something more hidden, deeper, and more powerful going on? Something that irreparably changes our life, soul, and spirit? This question may have arisen in your mind. What's wrong if I fantasize a little? Isn't this harmless? Maybe this is the first time you look into the depth of such thoughts. But something inside you, an invisible feeling, made you curious to know more. These thoughts may only be pretty on the surface, but are you ready to see behind the curtain? This book is a journey into your mind. A journey to the dark and hidden corners that you may not have been aware of until now. We step into the world of sexual fantasies, a world that, although it looks tempting, has challenges, injuries, and changes that can change your life forever. Here, you will find the answers you have been looking for a long time. But you should know that every answer you will find in this book will be a challenge. Every step you take forward will lead you to truths you may never have expected. Are you ready to start this journey? Are you ready to remove the veils of fantasy and face what is going on inside you? This book is a guide for people who are looking to discover the deepest layers of their mind and psyche. Those who want to know how these thoughts affect their soul, mind, and even their body. So if you are ready to go deep into these experiences, if you are ready to take a fresh look at the dark and complicated world of sexual fantasies with open eyes, start this journey with us. But don't forget, the further you go, the truths you discover may change you forever. This book is only for those who are ready to face the facts. The facts that are hidden behind every fantasy and every image, but their impact on life is endless and undeniable. Are you one of those people? Chapter 1. Tempting Mirrors. Definition of sexual fantasies. Have you ever wondered how a mental image can be so powerful that it affects our lives? Sexual fantasies are those kinds of imaginations that can not only bring short moments of pleasure or escape from reality, but are like a mirror that reveals our hidden desires, fears, and desires. But what are these images really? Where do they come from and how did they find such an important place in our mind and culture? Sexual fantasies, in their simplest definition, are mental images and thoughts that form around sexual topics. These fantasies can be limitless, sometimes pleasurable, and sometimes even embarrassing. But what makes them so powerful? Why are our minds drawn to these imaginings? And is it just a form of entertainment, or an escape from reality, or perhaps something more? The question comes to your mind, are these ideas nothing more than just passing fancy? Don't these images have a deeper effect on our souls? Maybe this is the first time you think about this deeply, but the more you look at it, the more you realize that these ideas are woven into our mental fabric. Sexual fantasies have always been a part of human culture throughout history. From myths and legends to art and literature, sexual desires and imaginations have been shown in various forms. But as human societies progressed, these ideas also changed. When people used to take refuge in such images only in their dreams or personal thoughts, nowadays technology, sex videos, and social media have brought these ideas closer to the real world. Sex films, as one of the industrial products of modern society, depict exactly these sexual fantasies. But are sex films really anything more than a reflection of our mental imaginations? Or maybe it can be said that the sex movies themselves play an essential role in shaping and changing these perceptions? Are these images just entertainment, or do they have deeper and more complex effects on the mind and even on society? With the advent of technology and the internet, sex videos became easily accessible to everyone. Images that were once limited to art and literature are now accessible at any moment. But has this cultural change really benefited us? Are sex movies just a reflection of our desires, or has the industry managed to change our desires in an irreversible way? This industry works in such a way that it gradually conquers our minds. Do we choose to see these images or do they choose us? You might ask yourself, why is it so important? What does it matter how sexual fantasies affect me or society? The truth is that these perceptions, in an invisible way, affect how we interact with others, our perceptions of ourselves, and even our beliefs about love and relationships. They can blur the line between reality and fantasy, and keep us away from experiencing real and emotional relationships. In this chapter, we are not limited to a simple definition. Here, we intend to take a deeper look at how these ideas were formed by traveling to the past and examining historical developments. From ancient times to today, what has caused sexual fantasies and sexual movies to find such a special place in our minds and lives? Maybe this is the first time you are thinking about these questions. Maybe your mind is also involved in how these thoughts and images can have such power that they can affect our behavior, attitude, and even our mood. In this journey into the depths of sexual fantasies and their effects, surprising answers await you. Are you ready to remove the veils of fantasy and look at the truth behind it? Watching sexual movies and engaging in sexual fantasies not only have negative effects on psychological and social aspects, but can also have profound spiritual and otherworldly effects. Let us briefly discuss these complications and take a comprehensive look at their effects on a person's soul and energies. 1. Effect on spiritual energies. In many cultures and spiritual beliefs, each person has some kind of energy field known as an aura. This aura represents a person's mental and physical condition and acts as a shield to protect him from negative energies. Watching sexual videos repeatedly can attract negative and unhealthy energies. These negative energies usually come from negative mental states, abnormal behaviors, and unrealistic perceptions. Feeling restless. Many people who watch sex movies repeatedly experience feeling restless, bored, and anxious. These feelings are caused by the absorption of negative energies and the lack of balance in a person's energy aura. For example, a person who is used to watching sex videos may have problems feeling relaxed because of unrealistic images of themselves and their sexual partners. This can lead to depression and mental tension. 2. Damage to the energy aura. In the beliefs related to aura, this energy field must be kept healthy and balanced so that a person can perform better in his life. Watching sexual movies can significantly affect this aura and lead to serious damage in it. Physical and mental problems. When the energy aura is damaged, a person may be exposed to physical diseases or suffer from mental and emotional disorders. For example, a person who frequently fantasizes or watches sexual videos may end up with erectile dysfunction, decreased libido, or even depression. These problems not only affect the person but also cast a shadow on his relationships with others. 3. Impact on gender identity. Repeated viewing of sexual videos can have profound effects on a person's sexual identity. This is especially important for young people who are still forming their identity. Change in identity perceptions. Sex films usually present an unrealistic and exaggerated image of sexual relations and sexual identity. This may cause people to have unrealistic perceptions of themselves and others and lead to unusual or unorthodox behaviors. For example, a person who is used to watching sexual movies may engage in behaviors that conflict with their true identity in an effort to fulfill these fantasies. This conflict can lead to feelings of guilt and embarrassment, and ultimately lead to a decrease in self-esteem and life satisfaction. 4. Social complications. The social effects of watching sexual videos are also significant. These complications can affect the quality of human relationships and social interactions. Decreased social relationships. People may withdraw from social interactions and real relationships due to addiction to sex films. This type of social isolation can lead to a decrease in the quality of life and feelings of loneliness. People may prefer to spend their time watching sexual videos instead of engaging in social activities and connecting with others. This social isolation may lead to serious problems in emotional relationships and human communication. As a result, in general, sexual fantasies or watching sexual films and sexual films can have profound and far-reaching effects on various aspects of a person's life. From psychological and social effects to spiritual and otherworldly complications, all these issues are connected in some way and can lead to a decrease in the quality of life and human relationships. Therefore, it is important that people pay attention to the effects of this type of content on themselves and their relationships and seek professional advice or help if needed. This awareness can help reduce negative side effects and improve the quality of life and lead people to a healthier and more balanced life. Chapter 2: Hidden Traps. Sexual films and their effects on the psyche. Before starting the main content of the book, let us have a short look at the effects of the sex movies. Please stay with me until the end of the book. When you sit down to watch a porn movie, you might think that it's just a momentary pastime, something that comes and goes quickly. But is it really so? Have you ever wondered what effects are taking place behind these seemingly innocuous images? What effect do they have on your mind and psyche? In this chapter, we will look at the complex and hidden world of sex films and examine its effects on the psyche and life of people. Sex movies are apparently just a show of sexual fantasies, but the reality is something much further and darker. Behind these images, there is a set of mental problems that slowly affect your psyche without you realizing it. These problems are like traps that sink you deeper every time you watch sex movies. But what are these traps? The first trap is addiction. At first, it may seem like watching sex videos is just an occasional hobby. But over time, this hobby becomes a necessity. Every time you watch it, your brain seeks to experience the same initial pleasure. This pleasure is actually caused by the release of dopamine in the brain, a hormone that makes you feel happy and satisfied. But with constant repetition, your brain is no longer satisfied with this level of dopamine and needs more of it each time to experience the same feeling. This is where addiction takes place. You can no longer go about your daily life without watching sex videos, and this content becomes a constant and uncontrollable need. But addiction is only the beginning. The psychological effects of sex films are deeper than you might imagine. One of the common problems that arise from watching sexual movies continuously is creating unrealistic expectations in emotional and sexual relationships. The images and scenes you see in sex movies are not a reflection of reality. They are distorted and extreme images of human relationships that are far removed from real life. This type of content makes you have unrealistic expectations of your emotional and sexual relationships. You expect your partner to act the way you see them in these movies, but those expectations are never met. The result? Disappointment, frustration, and inability to establish real and healthy relationships. These psychological effects also affect your emotional relationships. Constantly watching sex videos can keep you away from creating a deep and real connection with your partner. Over time, your feelings and emotional relationship will give way to imaginary and distorted images from sex movies. You no longer see the need for real communication, because your mind is immersed in an imaginary and unreal world. This emotional distance gradually creates gaps in your relationship, gaps you may never be able to fill again. You might ask, how can something that seems like fun lead to increased anxiety and depression? The truth is that watching sex films, due to the creation of unrealistic expectations and the inability to meet them, over time causes a decrease in self-confidence and an increase in anxiety. When you can't achieve what you see in these movies in the real world, you feel helpless and incompetent. These feelings lead to depression and anxiety over time. You no longer see yourself as worthy of real relationships, and you gradually distance yourself from the real world. Increasing feelings of loneliness is another unwanted result of watching sexual videos. Instead of spending time making real and meaningful connections with others, you spend more time in the fantasy world of sex movies. This isolation and distance from social relationships makes you feel more lonely over time. And this loneliness itself can create a cycle of addiction to sex movies. Because in search of escaping these negative feelings, you are drawn to watch sex movies again and again. Have you noticed how this vicious cycle is formed? From addiction to sex movies to unrealistic expectations, from destroying emotional relationships to increasing anxiety and depression. Every time you watch this content, you are sacrificing a part of your mental health and relationships without realizing it. This is a harsh truth, but it is true. This chapter is just the beginning of your journey into the complex and hidden world of the effects of sex films on the psyche. Are you ready to face these invisible truths? Chapter 3. Hidden Thoughts. The effect of sexual fantasies on mental health. Have you ever been introverted and faced with thoughts that transcend the boundaries of reality? In the fantasies that take place in your mind and may seem harmless. But is it really so? Are sexual fantasies just a mental pastime, or may they have deeper and hidden consequences in our psyche and life? In this chapter, we will take a journey into the human mind and examine the psychological effects of sexual fantasies. Sexual fantasies are imaginary images created by the mind that may at first seem like a way to escape from everyday reality and reach a more pleasurable world. But the reality is that these fantasies can gradually destroy the border between reality and fantasy in your mind and change your understanding of life and real relationships. But how? One of the first consequences of these fantasies is increased anxiety. Maybe in the early moments, these fantasies give you a sense of happiness and excitement, but when you return to reality, you will face a bitter reality. None of these concepts exist in the real world. This same issue will eventually make you feel powerless in the real world, because reality can never compete with the images that are imprinted in your mind. This difference between what you want and what you have gradually causes anxiety and dissatisfaction in you. You feel that you will never achieve what is in your dreams, and this issue can lead you to some kind of mental unrest. Another important consequence of sexual fantasies is depression. When you are constantly immersed in your fantasy world, you gradually distance yourself from the real world. This distancing from reality creates a gap between the mind and the outside world. Gradually, you are no longer satisfied with what you have in real life, because your mind is involved in an imaginary world that you can never achieve. This distance between fantasy and reality leads to a kind of dissatisfaction with real life that fuels depression. Depression that is caused by the inability to realize mental ideas and prevents you from enjoying your daily life. Another less noticed consequence of sexual fantasies is a decrease in self-esteem. In your fantasies, you may see yourself in roles that are very attractive and fulfilling. But when you return to the real world, you may feel like you don't match that fantasy image at all. This mismatch will eventually decrease your self-esteem. You no longer see yourself as worthy because you are always compared to that imaginary image. The more you fuel these fantasies, the more you sink into the feeling that you are not enough and that you will not be able to achieve what you want. This feeling of inadequacy can permeate all aspects of your life and lead to a kind of psychological self-destruction. In addition to personal effects, sexual fantasies can also lead to changes in your social relationships. When your mind is occupied with these fantasies, you may not be able to communicate properly with others. It may seem that others cannot give you what you have in your dreams, and this feeling of disappointment causes you to distance yourself from others. This distance gradually reduces your social relationships and creates a kind of isolation. You will no longer be able to interact with others in the same way you used to. These changes in social relationships will gradually reduce the quality of your personal and social life. But are all these consequences inevitable? Is it possible to escape from the traps of these hidden fantasies? The truth is that being aware of the effects of these fantasies is the first step in dealing with them. Many people who get caught in these traps are not aware of its psychological and social consequences. They don't know how these fantasies are slowly affecting their lives without them realizing it. But you are aware now. This awareness can guide you in the right direction and prevent you from falling into these hidden traps. Now is the time to examine these truths carefully and see how you can protect your mental and social life from their destructive effects. Are you ready to face this dark and hidden world? Chapter 4. Hidden Fantasies Behind Relationships. The effect of sexual fantasies on emotional relationships. Have you ever felt that your relationship is not as deep and fulfilling as it should be? Or maybe you have noticed that in the middle of sensitive and intimate moments, your mind is drawn to thoughts that have nothing to do with your partner? These thoughts can be sexual fantasies, imaginations that are behind your emotional relationships and gradually create an invisible gap. In this chapter, we'll dive deeper into these fantasies and examine their effects on emotional relationships and true intimacy between partners. Sexual fantasies are like a fire that may be warm at first, but eventually it can become a flame that burns everything. In a healthy emotional relationship, intimacy and close communication are the main foundations. This relationship is built through mutual understanding, acceptance, and honesty. But when it comes to sexual fantasies, these foundations may gradually weaken. How? Sexual fantasies are often idealized and unattainable images of pleasure and intimacy that conflict with the realities of emotional relationships. This conflict gradually leads to dissatisfaction with real relationships. This dissatisfaction arises when your mind is filled with fantasies that your partner cannot fulfill. You may no longer enjoy intimate moments with your partner and look for something beyond reality, something that exists only in your imagination. This dissatisfaction gradually creates a distance between you and your partner, a distance that originates not from a lack of love, but from an unfair comparison between fantasy and reality. In addition, sexual fantasies can cause emotional distance between sexual partners. When you fill your mind with images of other people or imaginary situations, you distance yourself from your partner over time. You may still be in a relationship on the surface, but deep down in your mind and emotions, you no longer feel the same deep connection. This distance does not often appear suddenly. First, it appears in small moments, maybe a trivial conversation that doesn't interest you as much as it used to, or an intimate touch that doesn't make you feel any more. But over time, this emotional distance becomes bigger and more noticeable to the point where you can never feel the same closeness in your relationship as before. One of the biggest problems with sexual fantasies is creating unrealistic expectations. In these fantasies, everything seems perfect, from body to behavior and relationships. But the reality of life and relationships is full of challenges and flaws. When you carry yourself with these imaginary expectations, you become more disappointed every moment when you face reality. Over time, these unrealistic expectations will make you stop satisfying your partner and make you feel like you're missing out. This feeling of failure gradually puts pressure on emotional relationships and may cause tensions and disputes. Finally, sexual fantasies can lead to reduced intimacy and real connection between partners. True intimacy is built through honesty and heartfelt communication, but when your mind is occupied with fantasies, you can no longer be fully intimate with your partner. You may still be together, but you will no longer have the deep emotional connection that should exist between you. This decrease in intimacy eventually makes relationships cold and soulless, and makes people feel lonely in their relationship. So how can these harmful effects be avoided? The first step is to be aware of the existence of these fantasies and their effects on relationships. You need to examine yourself and see if your fantasies are harming your emotional and sexual life. Then, you need to communicate with your partner and talk about these issues. Honesty and open communication are the keys to bridging these gaps and helping you get back to reality. As a result, we can say that sexual fantasies, although they may seem harmless at first, can gradually affect emotional and intimate relationships and cause hidden cracks. Now you are more aware and able to deal with these challenges. Chapter 5. Hidden Shadows on the Bed of Imagination. Sexual disorders caused by sexual fantasies. Have you ever wondered why your libido is low or why you experience physical disturbances at critical moments? Maybe you have never thought that the sexual fantasies that occupy your mind can be behind the curtain of these problems. Sexual fantasies, with all the attraction and momentary pleasure they bring, can actually have a profound effect on your body and mind, effects that often occur unintentionally and without you realizing it, and ultimately affect the quality of your sexual relationships and emotional life. By creating an unattainable and ideal world in the mind, sexual fantasies cause problems in real sexual relationships. One of the main problems is erectile dysfunction. A mind preoccupied with unrealistic images and exaggerated notions of sexual relations may not be able to respond properly when faced with reality. This contradiction between imagination and reality, over time, reduces the physical ability to respond to real stimuli. One may find that during intimate moments, one's body does not react as expected. This inability to create or maintain an erection is due to the mind's dependence on images that never exist in the real world and cannot replace real experiences. In addition to erectile dysfunction, sexual fantasies can also lead to decreased libido. Because these fantasies create unrealistic expectations of sexual relations by creating perfect images and ideal pleasures. When your body becomes addicted to fantasy, it can no longer respond easily to real stimuli. Gradually, your libido will wane because reality can never compete with your fantasies. This decrease in sexual desire, especially in long-term relationships, can cause distance and coldness in sexual and emotional relationships. Another hidden and harmful effect of sexual fantasies is psychological effects on sexual performance. When your mind is constantly engaged in sexual fantasies, the body somehow gets used to this pattern. In other words, mental stimulations caused by fantasies replace real stimulations. This can lead to problems such as the inability to experience sexual pleasure in real relationships. A person may feel confused or dissatisfied in their sexual relationships because their mind has become accustomed to a different stimulation pattern and can no longer fully respond to physical and emotional stimulation. Finally, all these factors work together to reduce the quality of a person's sexual relations. When sexual fantasies replace real experiences, a person can no longer fully enjoy intimate moments with their partner. Sexual relations become a mechanical and emotionless activity that brings distance and dissatisfaction instead of closeness and intimacy. This issue can lead to more serious problems in the long run, such as coldness of relationships, betrayal, or even the collapse of the relationship. So how can these problems be avoided? Awareness and self-control are the keys that can help you get away from this imaginary world and return to reality. When you realize the negative effects of sexual fantasies on your body and mind, you have taken the first step to deal with them. Also, talking to your partner and creating an honest and open relationship can help you overcome these problems and get back to a real and deep connection. So, as a result, sexual fantasies, although they seem pleasant and harmless at first, can have a profound effect on your physical and sexual performance over time. These effects gradually weaken your emotional and sexual relationships and create an invisible distance between you and your partner. Now that you are aware of these dangers, you can take the first step to return to reality and maintain your emotional and sexual relationships. Chapter 6: Journey into the Dark. The spiritual effects of sexual fantasies. In the spiritual world, have you ever wondered why you feel like something is missing from you after a sexual fantasy? Perhaps at first glance, sexual fantasies seem like an escape from reality. But the truth is that these fantasies have deep and hidden effects not only on the body and mind, but also on the depth of human existence and spirituality. Is it possible that every time our mind engages in these fantasies, we distance ourselves from our spiritual energy and connection with our true selves? Sexual fantasies, beyond momentary pleasure, create an unknown and dark space in our mind and soul. In this space, the connection with our true self, which is based on honesty, purity, and peace, fades away. A person who is constantly involved in these fantasies gradually moves away from that true connection with his inner self. Because these fantasies portray his human and natural needs in an unrealistic and exaggerated way and cause a person to be misled about himself and his desires. In other words, sexual fantasies divert us from the path of spiritual growth that requires focusing on the true self and discovering authentic values. Negative effects on the soul are also another important aspect of this issue. The human soul is a source of pure and subtle energy that is directly related to our intentions and thoughts. When our mind is constantly involved in sexual fantasies, this subtle energy is directed towards fleeting and unstable stimulations instead of being directed towards spiritual growth and inner peace. This causes a decrease in spiritual energy and the gradual destruction of our spiritual layers. A person who is involved in these delusions may feel mentally exhausted, depressed, and drained of energy over time. This mental fatigue is the result of wasted energy that should have been used to strengthen and balance the soul. One of the important aspects of spiritual influences is blockage in the flow of spiritual energies. Sexual fantasies can disrupt the flow of positive and life-giving energies in our body and mind. This blockage of energy, in addition to creating a feeling of restlessness and internal dissatisfaction, can lead to a decrease in creativity, happiness, and positive emotions. In other words, sexual fantasies act as a dark curtain between us and positive spiritual energies, preventing us from fully utilizing our spiritual potential. This can lead to a decrease in life satisfaction and loss of inner peace. In addition, the karmic effects of sexual fantasies are also worth considering. In many spiritual and transcendental teachings, our thoughts and intentions have direct effects on our future life and state of mind. When our mind is constantly engaged in sexual fantasies, these thoughts and intentions create a kind of negative vibration in the level of our spiritual energies. These negative vibrations can affect our karmic flow and lead to unpleasant experiences and spiritual obstacles in the future. For this reason, cleaning the mind and controlling sexual thoughts is necessary not only for maintaining mental health, but also for cleaning spiritual energies and spiritual advancement. But perhaps one of the most important aspects of the spiritual effects of sexual fantasies is the loss of the sense of sanctity in sexual relationships. In many cultures and spiritual beliefs, sexual relations are considered a sacred and deep bond between two souls. This connection is not only a physical pleasure, but also a spiritual experience that can bring unity and spiritual evolution. But when our mind gets involved in superficial and unstable fantasies of sex instead of focusing on this sacred bond, this sanctity is lost and sexual relations become a purely carnal activity. This issue can lead to a decrease in the satisfaction and depth of sexual relationships and ultimately deprive a person of deeper and more meaningful experiences of human relationships. At the end of this chapter, we reach a key point. Sexual fantasies have destructive effects not only on the body and mind, but also on the depth of human existence and spirituality. Over time, these effects can lead a person away from the path of spiritual growth through reducing the connection with the true self, losing spiritual energies, and weakening the flow of karma. Now that we have reached this awareness, we can look for ways to return to mental and spiritual balance, ways to bring us back to our true selves and restore our inner energies. Chapter 7. Communication Breakdown. Social consequences of sexual fantasies. Have you ever wondered how the thoughts that seem to flow in your mind can have such profound effects on the reality of your social life? Perhaps at first glance, sexual fantasies seem like only an internal and personal experience, but the truth is that these fantasies gradually affect your relationships and social life like an invisible chain. How is it possible that the thoughts that run in the mind actually alienate you from others? Isolation is one of the most obvious social effects of sexual fantasies. When the mind is constantly involved in these fantasies, a person gradually distances himself from the real world and takes refuge in an imaginary and inner space. This mental isolation gradually leads to social isolation, because a person can no longer be fully present in the moment and establish a deep and real connection with others. Even in social settings, his mind is still occupied with fantasies, which makes him unable to enjoy social interactions. Decreasing the quality of social relationships is another result of these fantasies. People who are constantly engaged in sexual fantasies gradually see others only as tools to satisfy their own mental needs. This type of superficial view of relationships makes a person unable to establish deep and meaningful connections with others. In fact, instead of trying to get to know people better and experience relationships based on trust and affection, he looks for experiences that only have superficial and fleeting aspects. In this way, his human relationships are severely damaged and the person is further away from the circle of friends and family. But perhaps one of the most profound social effects of these fantasies is the inability to make real and meaningful connections with others. Sexual fantasies gradually create unrealistic and ideal standards in a person's mind. These standards make a person unable to communicate with real people and the world around him, because no real person can achieve that level of imaginary expectations. As a result, a person experiences frustration and dissatisfaction in communicating with others. This frustration affects not only emotional relationships but also friendships and even work. Another aspect of the social complications of these fantasies is the reduction of empathy and mutual understanding. A person whose mind is constantly occupied with sexual fantasies gradually loses the ability to understand the feelings and needs of others. Because his mind is busy with satisfying his desires and he cannot fully pay attention to others. This decrease in empathy makes him less accepted in social environments and gradually excluded from his circle of social connections. Over time, sexual fantasies can cause a person to distance themselves from their social roles. For example, the person may not be able to fulfill their social duties and responsibilities properly as a partner, parent, friend, or other coworker. Because his mind is involved in sexual fantasies instead of focusing on his real needs and social responsibilities. This issue can lead to problems such as failure in relationships, loss of work positions, and even a reduction in social status. Finally, the lack of real connection with self and others is one of the most profound social consequences of sexual fantasies. A person whose mind takes refuge in the world of fantasy instead of the realities of life gradually distances himself from his true self. This distance from himself makes him no longer able to know his needs and desires properly, and as a result, he distances himself from others. This separation from self and society gradually puts a person in a cycle of isolation and dissatisfaction that is difficult to get out of. Now that we have examined the social implications of these fantasies, can we still see sexual fantasies as a harmless experience? Or are these fantasies actually distancing us from the real world and the people around us? Chapter 8. Real Experiences. Success Stories. How does it feel to see a hole of light in the middle of the darkness? Is it possible to move from the swamp that engulfs the mind and soul to light and freedom? In this chapter, we meet people who have been able to free themselves from sexual fantasies and addiction to sex movies. Their stories show how to overcome difficult challenges and return to a healthier, more vibrant, and meaningful life. First story: Covenant and Freedom from Loneliness. Payman, a man in his early 40s, had turned to sexual fantasies and watching sexual movies for years due to work and emotional pressures. He admits that this behavior was a way to escape from reality. But over time, his fantasies engulfed him, and his real relationships were gradually overshadowed. Instead of communicating with his wife, Payman takes refuge in fantasies. His feelings turned cold, and his relationship with his family suffered a crisis. But one day, when he realized that he was losing his wife and children, he decided to return to real life. With the help of an expert consultant, Payman was gradually freed from this psychological and emotional dependency. By pursuing practical solutions such as meditation, mental exercises, and psychotherapy, he succeeded in removing negative thoughts and harmful attachments from his life. Payman is now involved in a stronger emotional relationship with his wife and is present with his children as a better father. The second story: Sarah and the Return to Self-Esteem. Sarah, a woman in her late 30s, had been obsessed with sexual fantasies since she was a teenager. It had gradually become a part of his daily life, and even damaged his romantic relationships. As he became more dependent on sexual fantasies, he felt his self-esteem diminish day by day. His romantic relationships quickly failed and he was unable to establish real and lasting relationships with others. One day, after the end of another romantic relationship, Sarah decided to change. He realized that he could not experience true love unless he first freed himself from his mental attachments. By pursuing psychology courses and participating in support group meetings, he managed to slowly get rid of this dependence and return to a healthier emotional life. Now, Sarah has not only distanced herself from sexual fantasies, but has also rebuilt her self-esteem and found success in her romantic relationships. The third story: kindness and victory over addiction. Ehsan, a man in his mid-30s, was addicted to watching sexual movies for years. Over time, this addiction separated him from the real world and the people around him. His friendships and professional relationships were affected, and he found himself in complete isolation. While others did not know what he was doing, Ehsan had sunk into the depths of his darkness. After a long struggle with this dependency, Ehsan decided to get out of this destructive cycle. By referring to specialist therapists and using cognitive therapy techniques, he was able to take the first steps to get rid of addiction. Although this path was difficult and challenging for him, Ehsan finally managed to return to his normal life. She now has healthier and more successful relationships in her work and personal life and helps others break free from these destructive addictions. The fourth story: Nima and life reconstruction. Nima, a young woman in her early 30s, reached a turning point after years of struggling with sexual fantasies and watching sexual movies. He felt that his life was lost, and he had no hope to return to a healthy life. His emotional and professional relationships were affected, and he even suffered from severe depression. One day, after talking to a friend, Nima decided to make a serious change. By referring to psychotherapy specialists and following group therapy sessions, he was able to get rid of these harmful dependencies over time. Now, as an independent and self-aware person, Nima has started a new life and has achieved remarkable achievements in her work and emotional life. These success stories show that no one is permanently captive to the side effects of sexual fantasies and sex movies. People who have faced these challenges have been able to rebuild their lives with effort, determination, and using effective solutions. Are you ready to become your own success story? Chapter 9: Methods of Dealing with Complications. Have you ever wondered how to get rid of the harmful effects of sexual fantasies? You may feel that you are trapped in a vortex from which there is no way out. But the truth is that even in the darkest moments, there is a glimmer of hope. This chapter offers you tools that can open a new path in your life, one that leads to balance, peace, and freedom. Counseling and psychological treatment. The first and most effective solution is to refer to counselors and psychotherapy specialists. Many people who are faced with sexual fantasies and its complications have managed to control and treat this issue through individual counseling and group therapy. Using various techniques, including cognitive therapy, CBT, psychotherapists help a person to identify his negative thought patterns and provide alternative solutions to deal with these patterns. Psychotherapy sessions can reduce mental dependencies and restore self-esteem over time. Self-help and mindfulness techniques. One of the most powerful self-help tools is mindfulness and meditation techniques. Meditation helps you to consciously control your mind and manage unproductive thoughts instead of being trapped by your thoughts. Daily practice of meditation and deep breathing techniques can calm your mind and reduce the intensity of sexual fantasies. Focusing on the present moment and avoiding wandering thoughts is the first step to controlling these unhealthy habits. Create a regular schedule. One of the aggravating factors of sexual fantasies is unemployment and lack of regular planning. When the mind is not busy, it tends towards scattered and harmful thoughts. Therefore, setting a daily schedule that includes physical activity, work, study, and healthy recreation can help reduce the amount of sexual fantasies. In this program, you should allocate time to do useful and productive activities so that your mind and energy are directed in a positive direction. Alternative exercises to control cravings. In many cases, the need for sexual fantasies is formed due to unfulfilled emotional needs. One of the effective ways to deal with this desire is to replace it with useful and energetic activities. Exercising daily, walking, cycling, or even taking yoga and Pilates classes can help drain excess energy and reduce focus on sexual thoughts. Also, studying and learning new topics will push your mind towards bigger and more positive goals. Cut off access to stimulus resources. If stimulating sources such as sexual videos and sexual content are still available to you, it will be difficult to try to break the habit. The first practical step to deal with is to cut off access to these resources. Blocking websites, removing harmful apps, and staying away from virtual spaces that promote this type of content can help reduce temptation and create a healthier mental environment. Supporting self-help groups. Another powerful tool is to join support groups. Support groups such as NA and SAA can provide a safe space to share experiences and challenges. By participating in these groups, a person can benefit from the support of other people who are facing similar problems and receive useful and inspiring solutions from other people's experiences. These groups help a person heal over time by creating healthier human connections. Focus on real and emotionally healthy relationships. Sexual fantasies are often caused by a lack of real and meaningful emotional relationships. Therefore, strengthening and improving emotional and human relationships is one of the main ways to reduce the negative effects of sexual fantasies. This means building deeper connections with your spouse, friends, and family. Honest conversations, strong sensory and emotional connections, and attention to the real needs of others can help a person move away from the imaginary and harmful world and return to the real world. Changing thought patterns through study and learning. Reading books on psychology, personal development, and spirituality can help a person to recognize and change their negative and limiting thought patterns. Learning about the destructive effects of sexual fantasies and knowing better ways to deal with them will increase your decision-making power and willpower. The more you arm yourself with knowledge and awareness, the better you can break away from this destructive cycle. In this chapter, we presented several tools and methods for dealing with the effects of sexual fantasies and sexual videos. Each person can choose one or more solutions based on their own circumstances and use them in their life. This process may be time-consuming, but with effort, determination, and the use of expert guidance, it is possible to get rid of these habits and improve the quality of life. Chapter 10. The Future and Conscious Choices. Have you ever wondered what the world of tomorrow will look like? In a world full of rapid and extensive changes in which we live, conscious choices can shape the fate of our human relationships and emotional experiences. In this chapter, we'll look at cultural and social influences on sexual fantasies and the need for conscious choices, and ask you to think carefully about how you can shape your future in a positive and meaningful way. Cultural and social changes in the 21st century. Today's world is influenced by new technologies and significant cultural changes. Social media, porn websites, and unlimited access to sexual content have all influenced how people view relationships and sex. In this situation, the importance of conscious choices is felt more than ever. In particular, the choices we make about what we read, see, and experience will dramatically affect our relationships and the quality of our lives. The necessity of conscious choices. Conscious choices mean a deeper understanding of yourself and your surroundings. These choices affect not only personal life but also relationships with others. When people make conscious choices instead of automatic reactions, they can exercise more control over their emotions and behaviors. This approach can help reduce stress, anxiety, and disappointment caused by unrealistic expectations in emotional relationships. Effects on relationship quality. The quality of human relationships is surprisingly dependent on the choices we make about our sexual fantasies and related content. When a person makes conscious choices, they tend to move toward deeper and more meaningful relationships. These relationships are not only emotionally richer but also help people to get rid of superficiality and dissatisfaction, and instead achieve a sense of satisfaction and happiness. Cultural influences on individual choices. Culture plays a major role in the formation of beliefs and attitudes towards human relations. Hence, awareness of cultural influences on individual choices can help us make better choices. When a person understands what the culture and society expect from him, he can respond with a more accurate assessment of them and make better decisions as a result. The future of human relations. The future of human relationships in the digital world is strongly influenced by our choices. Due to the speed of social and cultural changes, people should be more careful in their choices. Will we move towards superficial and temporary relationships or towards depth and meaning in emotional relationships? The answer to this question is only in our hands. Creating collective awareness. To build a positive future, we must not only make conscious choices individually, but also pay attention to collective consciousness. The conversation about the negative effects of sexual fantasies and sexual films should be widespread in our societies. By sharing experiences and learning from each other, we can make a collective move to improve the quality of human relationships and achieve a brighter future. Emphasis on personal responsibility. Finally, personal responsibility plays a significant role in shaping the future of human relations. Each person should pay attention to the fact that his choices affect not only himself but also others. We need to be more careful and aware of our choices and think about their possible effects on our relationships and others. In this way, we can build a balanced future full of deep and meaningful connections. This chapter reminds you that the future you live in is the result of the choices you make today. By making informed and responsible choices, you can move toward a future full of hope and satisfaction. In this complex world, you are the only one who can determine the fate of your human relationships. So let's choose carefully and bravely. Conclusion. In this book, we have discussed the hidden side effects of sexual fantasies and watching sexual movies, and we have tried to look at this issue from different angles. By examining the psychological, social, and spiritual effects of these activities, we have shown how these behaviors can affect individual lives and human relationships. The negative effects that come from watching sexual films and sexual fantasies clearly affect a person's quality of life and emotional relationships. Being aware of these complications allows us to make better choices in our lives. When a person is aware of the negative effects of these behaviors, he can move towards positive and constructive changes. Conscious choices affect not only the person himself but also the environment around him and help to improve the quality of human relationships. By using the successful experiences of others and the tools available to deal with the complications of these activities, we can create a clearer path to a positive and meaningful future. Remember that in a world full of information and choices, awareness can lead us to a life full of satisfaction and happiness. Finally, we invite you to move towards choices that will help you grow and flourish personally and socially with a deeper understanding of yourself and your environment. Your future is in your hands, and with conscious choices, you can significantly improve the quality of your human relationships.